Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We're going to get started. Nick, it's great to have you here today, man. I've been looking forward to talking with you. And I guess we'll get started here. And if anyone has questions, post those in the comments. This is an AMA. Focus those toward Nick because I'm here every week and can answer your questions anytime. So if you guys have any questions for Nick, just post those underneath the space. I think we're going to get started with a couple intro questions, and then we'll get into those questions in the comments. So if you have those, just post them right underneath the space or somewhere that we'll see them, and we'll be able to get to those. But Nick, great to have you here today, man. And I wanted to get started by asking you a couple of intro questions for the audience that might not be familiar with you and your work. I wanted to ask you how you got into crypto.
Wow, that's a good question. And thanks for having us, Nate. I've been looking forward to this. How did I get into crypto? So I was a physicist when I started out as flying kind of DrNickA. I did a PhD in physics, which I got in about 2008, and then moved through astrophysics for a couple of years. And then kind of got like slightly disenchanted with experimental physics, and I was sort of drifting around in the physics space, and my PhD was so traumatic I couldn't even pick my thesis up again. I just wanted out. So I decided to sort of switch into a tangential discipline, took a lectureship in maths and mathematics, and my first course was number theory and cryptography. And this was in about 2010. And number theory is like a super abstract field. It's like you literally, you're looking at what the Greek mathematicians from 2,000 years ago were doing, like prime number theory, modular arithmetic. And the students are all going mad at like, why should I even understand this? And so I basically, turned it into a cryptography course. And towards the end of the course, I was looking at practical applications of cryptography, and because it's the application of number theory that I like is profoundly like important these days. And discovered an article from Slashdot about the Bitcoin white paper, and so that was around 2010, 2011. I think it was the second year. So I discovered Bitcoin very, very early. I remember saying to my students, this is going to change the world, and then forgot about it for like 3 years. And then a few years later, I ended up buying some like modafinil or some sketchy nootropics off medsforbitcoin.com and sort of bought some Bitcoin then. Again, that was my second sort of touch point to it. The bit where I just like, right, I'm all in on this was when the DAO happened. At the time, I was building a decentralized organization inside a university, and I thought, this is it. This is how the world changes. This is how you can truly scale mass collaboration. And I'd say there's not been a day gone by since I read that article about the DAO exploding that I haven't been all in on crypto. So that was pretty much the trajectory.
That's incredible. Yeah, you mentioned earlier today that you were going back to teaching, and I was thinking that's such a wild crossover that you were in physics, learning, basically teaching, I'd imagine, astrophysics, and then I see that transition to cryptography. That seems like that makes more sense. Thanks for elaborating on that. I hear you with I also used my Coinbase account to buy modafinil back in like 2015 with Ethereum. That was one of my early forays into crypto as well. So that was before realizing all of it. That's such a cool origin story, man. It's I think we all I feel like most people's biggest regret is either not getting into Bitcoin when they first heard about it or not buying enough. And it sounds like that's common.
It's very common. I mean, I'd be a billionaire now or something if I bought it. Well, you couldn't buy it. It was pre-Gox. So when I first discovered Bitcoin, you had to mine it. And I was the kind of guy with like, download and compile stuff from like random repos and that. And it has bothered me. But I don't know, man. It's just everyone's got a journey, and it's like it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, I was an academic. I just didn't know or even understand like money and investing. Like when you're an academic, you're just kind of in a bubble that's isolated from the rest of the world, and you just kind of like money was just a thing that paid for my beer at the weekend, you know, and just paid my rent. And even the concept of markets and investing, just so alien, just didn't even process. And like that's one of the things I find like most important about crypto is that it genuinely democratizes the markets. Like it makes you think like, oh, this is how everyone, you know, makes millions of dollars. This is how people escape the game and, you know, get out of the factory, if you like, and realize their own destiny is by playing this like global gambling game that everyone's into, you know. So yeah, that I just didn't think about money and investing at that time, and that's is what it is.
Yeah, and that's a kind of a good segue into the next question I had for you. You left a PhD, which is like pretty high level academia. That's about the highest level you can reach, and you've mentioned it, and we've talked a little bit about it so far. I know you're really passionate about physics and about cryptography and these more academic subjects. Why is crypto more important to you, or why is crypto so important to you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've been reflecting on this a lot. I mean, like I said, I'm sort of drifted back into. I can't quite leave the academy. Like I'm doing some teaching this year, where I'll be sort of like analyzing the commons as a construct and thinking about DAOs and getting people to sort of analyze this stuff on a critical level. But yeah, there's never ending things. Like academia is like a game. Like it's in a Steam driven game. It's highly competitive. And yeah, you do your PhD, and that's just like the entry pass, right? And then you become a lecturer, or you start off as an associate lecturer, then a lecturer, then a senior lecturer. I got to associate dean, and the next level is dean. And I thought, I don't want to do that. It's too much work. I just hit. I sort of climbed up the sort of greasy academic pole, if you like, just by doing the stuff that no one else wanted to do. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll run that course. I'll take on this responsibility. And yeah, but it frustrated the hell out of me. It was like I realized it was partly like crypto that pilled me on the outside world, where I like, there's this whole other game outside of this. And I moved to London in 2017. I got a job I was an associate dean at the London College of Fashion, believe it or not. And I was there for a few years. And as soon as I got to London, the first thing I did was I flew in from Eastern Europe. I spent the summer in Eastern Europe. Through my rucksack, I threw all my possessions away. I basically got nothing. I had a rucksack, and that was it. And I threw it in and went to an event landed in London and went straight to an event called Coin Scrum, which was like I was dying to get into the crypto scene in London. I was just totally intoxicated by it. I was just like, this is my scene. And then just basically moonlighted while I was like part-time associate dean, part-time building token economies for various sketchy ICOs and stuff that were around. Like I must have written about a dozen ICO white papers, and I've got endless bags of shit coins that never made it to market. But nevertheless, it just loved it. I thought, this is it. This is the energy I'm looking for. And yeah, for about 3 years, I was just dying to escape academia, and it took till DeFi summer to happen. And yeah, I ended up sort of pulling off a raise really quickly and jumping into crypto full time.
Incredible. That's such a great origin story, and like I see the full transition now between like discovering Bitcoin.
Have you lost me, or have I lost you?
Oh, might be. I guess I can't switch to co-host on the main account yet. We'll go here. That's so awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I see your passion for democratizing finance and sort of like leveling the playing field. And it seems like crypto has done for you what you hope it does for other people, which is give them a window into the outside world, and give them like an opportunity to branch out in their their fields, and attain something outside of the corporate ladder that they've been climbing.
Yeah, it is. It's like, I don't know. It's a kind of massively multidisciplinary subject. I mean, like, I'm still an academic at heart, and like, I'm addicted to like just researching stuff, and I'm fascinated by things I don't understand. And I found crypto to just be this like endless thing where you can just like learn about everything from, like, I basically crash learned economics in like a year, and then moved into game theory and mechanism design, and then reconnected all my work in governance with DAOs. And yeah, it's just like, it is a window into the world because it brings in everything. It's like this new coordination system that allows anyone to sort of realize anything, really. Like, and this is what I see DAOs as, is like a template or a canvas for people to do whatever they want, and in a sort of collaborative context, and get things off the ground that they wouldn't get off the ground, and things like that. So yeah, I do see crypto as this window into a different world outside of whatever rat race people are in. Is definitely one of the ways I look at it.
Hmm. Hmm. And you mentioned a few things. You mentioned coordination, game theory, DAOs, and that hits on one of the subjects that I think. I mean, I don't know if you define yourself as a token economist in the same way, but that's definitely I think one of the main things that you focus on. Maybe we could talk about why token economics is so important to you, and what you see the role of token economics and coordination as.
Yeah, I certainly did. I was like known as Token Economics Nick in London for a while. I was the guy in London shopping around, kind of like token economics consultancy, and like, but I was like literally the only guy who still thought tokens was ever happen again. Though everyone, I don't know if you remember this, Nate, but like 2018, early 2019, people were like, just give up, Nick. Tokens are never coming back. It's never going to happen again. It was like a crypto thing, flash in the pan, gone forever, never going to happen. And I was like, don't stop being ridiculous. Of course it's all going to come back. Of course, they're like, this is a new tool. Like, this is a fundamentally like foundational way of doing things that isn't going anywhere. It's like saying pens are going to go, like, stop being used, like, or keyboards. It's just like, it's ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, like, why token economics? I saw them as like a new expressive way of generating alignment, of funding of funding enterprise, disrupting venture capital. Like, ICOs were one of the ICO period was just like electric. Like, it was just really interesting. Like, all of a sudden, like, it went from like, what's crypto, to everyone was doing an ICO. Like, there was a period where this guy in London was like saying, yeah, oh, you do token economics, I want you to talk to these startups. And I would sit in a Zoom room from like 5 p.m. to 1 in the morning talking to startups every 20 minutes, who were doing an ICO. It was insane. And just that energy, and like the sort of boom feeling of like, this is like, this movement is happening, and it's all going to be underpinned by these new token-based economies, I just found so exciting. And and yeah, unfortunately, it's never like the actual art and science of token economics has largely been underrepresented. I know we've been talking about this. Is like, people thought, yeah, token, just throw it into the market, but actually, you need a mechanism to make it work, and we did the whole last bull run without it, and it showed, basically. So I still think it's probably the most important thing in the space.
And that's a huge claim. Like, I agree with you 100%. I think it is the most important thing in the space. There's this quote by Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner. He said, "If you can focus on incentives, don't focus on anything else as a business owner." And so token economics is the business model of a protocol, more or less. And so to focus on the incentives is to focus on the token economics. And so I place it first among the priorities of founders and builders. I think
Yeah, couldn't
without,
agree more. Yeah.
yeah. And so maybe we can, what problems do you see that token economics solve? And I cut you off there, so say what you were going to.
No, I think this just the kind of, I like the way you phrased it. It's like this is like the business model of a protocol, and it is, but it isn't, right? There's like people, and I think one of the messes we've got in is like people try to project business model in quotation marks that you might have learned how to do on a MBA course somewhere and try and smash it into a crypto box. And actually, it's a radical new kind. It's a new paradigm of business model. It's not a business, it's a protocol, right? So it's something new. And like one of the things that attracts me so much to it, like as like a general, like I would call myself a general specialist, like I tour academic disciplines and then get obsessed on it for a bit until I feel like I've got down the rabbit hole enough to get a good feel for a discipline. And I'm sort of like fascinated by greenfield research. Like it's one of the things you're trained as a certainly coming out of physics, I ended up in like a hyper specialist like field, like a sub discipline of physics, because that's where physics is at, right? It's like, you know, you're at the edge of the universe, and it's just really hard work, right? You need like things like CERN. You need to be smashing protons together to like see, you know, unpick the universe. But like this is such a greenfield, brand new. No one knows what they're doing. Like no, there is no specialist. There is no experts. Now there is people like yourself, but we're still a rare breed. And that's what's exciting about it. It's a new business model. It's a new kind of way of generating economic alignment and ways of doing things. And yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that it's a new business model, but it's not business, right? It's token economics.
I really like that caveat and appreciate that, because I think people they go one of two ways. They either just slap a token on and say, well, everybody else has a token and this whole space is based on speculation, so we can just throw a token in there. And the other way people go about it is they go too hard on the business model analogy and they say, well, we should measure ourselves by our revenues, and maybe we'll give out dividends, or and maybe if they're really savvy, they're doing a buyback and burn or something like that. But even among the people who value cryptocurrencies as some sort of equity analog, are not really understanding the value and the way that it accrues to the tokens, where Ethereum is really not an equity like token. It's more of a commodity. It's more like oil than it is an equity, even though it pays out a dividend. And this might be a hot topic. Feel free to push back on it, but that's more or less my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think like people do the like, well, we need dividends and pay. And like, look, you're going to get Gary on you pretty quickly if you start giving out dividends on your token. And you know, it's hard to say, yeah, these aren't stocks, these aren't securities, if you're just doing a security in tokenized form, right? And look, I genuinely think security tokens are a whole class of token economics that will open up over the years as we get that regulatory clarity, or people just are decentralized enough to do it anyway, right? And then, but that's going to be a class of it's going to be a class of token economics, which is basically, yeah, it's a bit like a stock. In fact, it'll be better than stocks, because I mean, if you look at most of the stock market now, they're basically meme coins anyway, right? They're running at 200x, you know, profit ratios, and it's just like, you know, Google has to be worth like 100 more than the like a quadrillion dollars or something for that current value to make sense. So like, I think they'll do stocks, but better, sure. But yeah, I think there's a whole class of tokens that can be purely digital. You could look at Ethereum like a dividend, like the way that it burns its revenues. I consider like burn mechanics as an isotropic distribution of wealth, right? So just means like isotropic just means like the same in every direction. Like if you burn 1 ETH, that 1 ETH has been shared in value to everyone pro rata. And like, yeah, in many ways, it is a kind of dividend without a clear payback scheme, if you like. But yeah, I think there's like just in the utility token space, there's a huge amount of like the DApp era that we tried in 2017, but no one knew how to do it, so they all blew up and went to zero. That's going to happen, right? We're going to have decentralized applications that have tokens built into them that align the actors to do what it is that they're going to do. There's going to be DAO tokens that are going to be their own class of things that, again, align all these people in super interesting and new ways. And yeah, I think it's just a radically open and new design space that's going to get interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. And I love your take that ICOs are making a comeback. Did you see the Delphi tweet? They said they like announced that ICOs were making a comeback. That was Delphi rips off everything, dude. I'm sure I like it pisses me off so much because they were shilling Luna all the way to the end. Delphi pisses me off. Sorry, it's just a
really
personal thing.
I kind of don't know get into this kind of politics stuff. I'm not like
I don't either.
But I do like. I did love that they did it, right? So make ICOs great again. I've been pumping this narrative for like, I said, I was
6 years.
Yeah, like, yeah, okay. They all blew up. Most of them were scams, obviously, because the ICO contract was just, trade your ether for shitcoins like magic beans and hope the people on the other end of this smart contract don't run off with it. Like, obviously, they're going to go to zero. Doesn't mean decentralized crowdfunding is a bad idea. Doesn't mean initial coin offerings not going to make a comeback. Same thing again. And it's just that the trust models were bad, right? It's just that it was just a donation box. There was nothing different to an ICO then between people aping money into Ben.eth's wallet. They're the same. So obviously that model needs to evolve. So yeah, I'm very, very convinced like we got super excited about disrupting venture capital in 2017, 2018, which needs to happen. Like we're stuck in this mode of like letting these ivory tower people decide what's good and what's going to be, and they're just like coming at it from such a Web 2, they're just like TradFi attitudes coming directly into crypto and going like, yeah, you're supposed to do this thin wedge optimization of this like app and attack this like thing, and they're just like completely mapping in what probably didn't even work in like this is the funny thing about that whole thesis. Like there was a load of people who made money on Uber when they got in the early round, but only because they dumped their shares in the IPO or sold them on through the rounds. Uber lost $32 billion. Like it's $32 billion in the hole. They just give money away for free taxi rides for 10 years. It's not a success, right? They've got global penetration, but it's going to take them 100 years to close that hole. And and all they're doing is oppressing like taxi drivers globally now. So like even that old paradigm that made VCs money wasn't demonstrably good for the world, right? All we've created is data harvesting like monopolies, and like it didn't work, right? The world's a worse place in many ways for the stuff that come out there. We need new ideas. So we like the ICO needs to come back just to change the game.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. I see that. And I don't know if I'd fully connected I remember that being sort of the narrative back then of ICOs, but I'm not sure that I'd fully connected that now to the problems we're seeing coming out of Silicon Valley. There's a couple things there that I'd love to get into, and you just maybe pick one. But one I hear is the difference between creating a lot of value and capturing any value. It's kind of like Peter Thiel 0 to 1 idea. It's like you can build a business that has a lot of revenues without getting a lot of profit margins. And we see that in crypto with people creating a lot of value but not accruing it to their token, like Uniswap. Another might be the extra protocol incentives or the extra business incentives, sort of like incentives and ways to profit outside of the main business itself, where Uber is selling a lot of data and these other companies are selling data mostly to the government to spy on on citizens, and you know they're subsidizing that by accruing a large a large audience, a large user base. Take that whichever direction you'd like.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's definitely, like, I see Web3 sort of paradigms as it's all transparent, right? So the data is publicly available the instant it is. There's no data to farm because people are pseudonymous, right? We know that this is an account. In fact, the data is publicly open. And so it just kills that entire segment of the data economy, which has been driving.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
All the social media people. So that just isn't on the table, which is good, right? Because people will come and use Web3 tools to escape that stuff. And like now you're being like scraped relentlessly and turned into an AI. Like this is why Elon had to put like rate limits on Twitter, because there's like hundreds of actors just scraping Twitter so they can make, DrNickA GPT if they want. Like, and I've had one of the, it was a really interesting app where, you can put your Twitter account in and then it will generate tweets as you. And it was like saying stuff that I would say. It was like genuinely mad and weird. And like now anyone can do that. So people are going to want this new world that's just isolated from that. And so we don't have that business model. So we've got to exist outside of the data economy, which is good. But we do need to find out what the new paradigm is. How do we capture that value? And a lot of the way I see it, it's much more closer to kind of like monetary theory than your kind of classic business model idea. It's much more about flows of cryptocurrencies. Like it's about volume and capture, and so you've got a monetary base of tokens. If you're hyperinflationary, you need to offset that hyperinflationary dynamic with people buying up the supply and holding it and not selling it, keeping the velocity as low as you can. So it's much more about like, how do you control the flow of tokens into an economy? How do you persuade people to hold? What are the reasons to hold? Like if you've got tokens that if you're holding them, that shapes your interaction with the system, if it gives you influence in the system, like via a governance dynamic, if you need those tokens to be able to operate the mechanism. And like basically you're just looking at what's the inflation dynamic, like how is the monetary base expanding and how is the monetary base contracting by people holding the token long term or just burning it or using it. And it's much more closer to like macro monetary theory on a micro scale, which is like totally different to a kind of stock dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, currencies are completely different asset classes, completely different asset class than equities, and people are treating them all the same. I mean, we had Vasily on in maybe AMA number 5 or something like that. Vasily Sumanov has the periodic table of mechanisms, of value capture mechanisms, and he breaks it down into 9 different categories. A few of those you mentioned, like the influence over the system, might be like governance rights, and there are others where you have to lock some up in order to get rewards, so like a staking kind of mechanism. I break it down into 3, and this comes from Luigi Di Maio from Avalanche, great thinker on tokenomics. He said there are 3 types of analogs in traditional finance. You've got currencies, commodities, and equities. And all tokens are going to have mechanisms that resemble one of those or multiple of those. And in my mind, the key is stacking mechanisms in the correct order and matching up mechanisms that are compatible with each other so you're not creating any kind of token price dependencies in these tokens that you're issuing. And that's what I think the failure has been in many catastrophic system designs like Luna, was stacking tokenomic mechanisms which properly accrue value, but in the wrong order and with the wrong combination.
Yeah, I really like that way of framing it around sort of stacking. I think of it as a kind of, you have a kind of utility floor, I call it. What's the utility floor of the token? Like, realistically, what is it you can do with that token that is useful? Like, what does it do for you? What's in it for me? Like if I've got 1,000 of these tokens, what do I get for it? That's the utility floor. Like, and if you've got 10,000 people who've got that utility, then that's the base value of the token. And like I was experimenting with some of these. I remember looking at Link token in like 2018, 19 or something. I think it was about $4. And I calculated the utility token of it as like 0.004 cents or something like that. So that was when it was like $4 and it went to 100, right? So the utility floor is like the absolute base dynamic. Why do you need the token? What do you get out of it? And how many people want it? And then you kind of have the stack of things on top of that. Obviously, you've got the speculative dynamic on top of it. And that's largely where everything's been. Like the whole thing just trended into this kind of beauty contest where everyone's pumping these tokens. And it's just like what the value of it was like how many influencers paid to pump the token on Twitter or whatever. And yeah, that's just going to end because like, you're not going to be able to overtly pump tokens on Twitter anymore without getting in trouble with the feds. And it's going to come down to like, what is the real value for these tokens? So yeah, and like you mentioned the sort of catastrophic failures, Luna was like, again, that was just a hyperinflationary token. The problem there was like Do Kwon was controlled like a huge amount of the unlocked supply, right? So he's got this thing that was $1. And really, it was a mechanism for people who bought Luna at $3, run it up to 200 or 100 or whatever it was. And it was just a great way of liquidating tokens to people buying stable coins. It was just like he wrote a really illuminating article called like, it's all about seigniorage or something like that, which is basically like, yeah, it's about printing money. And they just got mega greedy. They started turning their reserve tokens and selling them OTC to people like Suzu, who was just like immediately arbing it through the market, and it just made everything super fragile. And so it wasn't even a decentralized stablecoin. And it was just like, they've just been open to abuse. And I think there's like, we've been in a position where something like every VC-backed currency has just been is already dead, right? It can't ever recover because 40-50% of the supply is owned by a dozen people or 24 people, and they're just going to be sold into the ground forever. And yeah, they're just like they'll never work just because they've been set up in a way that was value extractive, and that none of those token economies are going to live onwards, to be honest.
Yeah, it was literally just Vitalik's Seigniorage Shares article from 2013 or 2014 put into a token. It was a great way to for early buyers of Luna to offload. And I see the same thing in synthetics, actually. If you look at the assets that are minted on synthetics, it's a lot of synthetic ETH. And I can't see a single reason why you would want to hold synthetic ETH other than you have a lot of SNX tokens and want to get the alpha from Ethereum and not SNX. There's a whole thing there, but yeah, a lot of faulty system designs because people are just really not critical, and I think it's also that they don't have the mental models to parse where value comes from. But I agree with you that I think the financial system we are trending toward is one that's based on fundamentals rather than speculation. And I see a few trends in the token economics market or the designs of new protocols, but I'm interested, what trends are you seeing in new protocols, whether good or bad?
Yeah, I think I'm not seeing the trends I want to see yet, to be honest, but like that we're still looking at like the classic like token economics pie chart where people have just mapped this idea of a cap table onto crypto, and then they're just like literally treating it like a cap table. Give 40% to the VCs, I'll hold 50% of them or whatever. And yeah, I think I want that to start changing. I want us to not start looking at like mapping cap table dynamics onto token economies. I'd really be interested in seeing new mechanisms for using NFTs in new and interesting ways. So I think one of the next major dynamics is NFT governance. So I want to see the sort of death of, or at least the transition of, the dynamic of using fungible token governance as DAO governance tokens through to being NFTs, because people are non-fungible. So the governance of a system should be. So that allows you to do non-financial governance mechanics, right? Where you can nuance influence in a DAO by NFT governance. So I think that's going to be a huge trend. I think bonding curves are making a big comeback thanks to Friend Tech. So like Simon DeRubier came up with this in like 2017, something like that. And yeah, they're rocketing again but it's like the dumbest bonding curve you can get. It was like, but that's, people like it, even though it's all going to collapse fairly soon. It has collapsed 3 times already, but they've managed to get the CT influencers in to prop it all up enough. But yeah, bonding curves, which is great because actually I think there's all sorts of bonding curve dynamics. Token curated registries that's basically a token curated registry, so they're going to make a comeback. And auction dynamics, I really want to see people running at novel auction designs, new ways of bootstrapping liquidity, DICO models, thanks to Delphi bringing that back on the table. So they're the trends I'd like to see. And move away from this kind of classic cap table dynamic token economics as a colorful pie chart, and that's it.
Yeah, definitely. There's a bunch of those that I see coming back. I think token curated registries seem to make a comeback every bear market.
Yeah, totally. I was certainly one of the people who still am obsessed on these things. I think they're going to be.
I think yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of marketizing preference of. I think they're collective intelligence mechanisms, and that's when crypto is cool. That's like they come back every bear market because the hyperinflationary nonsense stops working, right? You know, when the $10 billion dog coins have all gone to zero and SafeMoon's gone to zero and all that shit, then we get back to what crypto's really about. So they come back because we get back to the values, and then we forget the values when everything starts mooning again, and then fundamentals don't matter. So yeah,
it's wild.
The good stuff comes back.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of comes back around to censorship resistance as the main value prop. And I would say I've been thinking about, I've been creating a mutually exclusive but completely exhaustive AMISI list of utilities, unique value propositions of dApps. And the first one, obviously, is censorship resistance, because you can't do that with anything else. Only blockchains can truly provide that. And the second is programmable money. And until the CBDC comes out, blockchains have a unique grip on that as well. And you mentioned a few things with programmable money, like auction mechanisms, novel auction mechanisms, and liquidity bootstrapping pools you might have mentioned, or I'm projecting that based on our past conversations. And it reminds me of a talk I saw Tarun Chitra give a few months ago. He described the implications of adding privacy into auction systems, and it was super fascinating. If anyone wants to look this up, I believe it was at ETH Denver at Crypto Econ Day. But we got a question from the audience, so I want to read that out and say, if anyone else has a question, just post that underneath the space and we'll answer it. So this question is, how do the dynamics of tokenomics change when darkness is introduced? Interested to hear if anyone is thinking through the changes in game theory when privacy is implemented, if any. I assume it makes things much more difficult. Nick, do you want to speak to that? Anything you've seen?
That is a super interesting question. Yeah, there's a limit to. So I've been thinking about this from. So I know Rose from DarkFi's building like dark DAOs, and that certainly makes all the governance dynamic much more difficult. But it also makes voting increases the fidelity of vote outcomes. So you see, like, if you don't know what the outcome of a vote is until it's done, like in a dark DAO, theoretically, you say you'd only know what's happened after the vote is completed. And ultimately, when we get trustless execution, you only know what's the outcome has been when it's happened. Like the actual state change, the DAO has changed, it's executed, it's done its thing, and that's how you know what's happened. And that's a radically different, that changes the game theory of DAO governance for the better, I think, because you need to have that private decision making, because people don't turn up if you know the votes like 90% yes because some whale has voted, the no voters just don't turn up, right, where they could have swung it. So I think the privacy and governance, really interesting, but the sort of corollary to that is you might have been captured and you don't know, right? So if you have a direct on-chain mechanism, there could have been a governance attack queuing up that you don't see, and the only way you find out is that you get rugged at the end, right? Slightly changes the dynamics. I think mechanisms with privacy, it does change. Like I say, I think in some ways it makes them more robust, and some makes them more fragile, because longer range attacks you just don't see coming quite so obviously. I think it limits the ability to do certain kind of mechanisms which essentially run on like public transparency. I think so. I'm trying to think about some of the. I think it changes token economics. It introduces like greater problems on understanding supply limits. If you've got an inflationary mechanism, it's very hard to like audit. Like if the real inflation, like Monero has this, like what's the real supply issue? Like there could be a supply leak in it, and no one really knows. So it does make the game theory more challenging, because you don't get like the games need to be public periodically to be able to understand what the game theory is. And if the game is always closed and you don't get the public information, it's very hard to reason about the game itself. But yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating area of mechanism design. That's going to be one of the areas where we truly break ground in game theory, because it's never happened before. I think that's going to be super interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I love that question. It's obviously there's the game
really great
applications. Yeah, I think there's a lot of mechanisms that have been theorized but have not been possible until now, and I think we're going to see a lot more emphasis on the programmable money value proposition of crypto because of it. We have another question. Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to I'll definitely check out Tarun's piece on the auction thing, because that's one of the ones where we'll really see the differences in the game theory between sort of blind bidding and open bidding, which I think will be like, it's a whole auction design that you get in the real world that we just can't do here yet because of its open transparency. I think so. Yeah, auction designs with sort of private elements could easily 10x the utility of an auction. So that's super interesting. It could also really help with MEV, right? Because the whole MEV game is about like interrogating this composability and essentially projecting out what's going to happen to a transaction state transition after you've done it. Now, if you've got private transactions, that just instantly makes everything 10x harder to front run. So yeah, just a couple of additional thoughts.
Yeah, I'm with that. It's frustrating to me that you don't really see that much talk about inserting privacy at the base layer to solve MEV, when in my mind, that is the obvious way to prevent MEV or to start moving on MEV. But, I think people are afraid of the state and retribution in some form for including privacy at the base layer. The other way I think about the answer to this question is like tokenomics or token economics become way more important when you don't know what the volume is going through an application, or you don't know what the KPIs are, the key performance indicators are of some application's success. If all you know is how it's designed and you can only guess or infer at how the system is working, you don't really know how to value it aside from the amount of money you think is going through, if you can't just scrape the data from a blockchain. So I think token economics become a lot more important in a state where privacy is included in transactions at various levels. We have another question from the audience. And again, if anyone has more, just post those below. But we got a question from Octopus saying, I've seen how people with different backgrounds, engineering, finance, traditional business, chemistry, etc., tend to bring certain cognitive toolkits when entering the token world. Do you think that physics or academia gives a particular recognizable perspective? It's a great question.
That is a really interesting question. I think, yeah, I mean, I think the physics background just basically trains you how to measure, right? How to reason about systems. Like it's really all about like the scientific method, about experimentation, and that's basically everything that we're doing here, right? It's like, but it happens on like a collective scale. So with everything that's tried is public, and we just get like the input data is so radically open that everything's an on-chain experiment. Like you can basically conceptualize all projects as on-chain research experiments. So certainly coming from, I would certainly say, you like certainly doing a PhD, you get trained in how to research, and research just such a fundamental part of understanding and reasoning about this space. And it certainly gives me a big edge being able to like, I can see like more of a direction of travel in crypto than quite a few people, just because I've been trained in, practices of research and inferring from data and spotting trends and what have you. So certainly on the physics side. Over the sort of years, I moved into the social sciences. I was like a learning theorist for many years, and then moved into organizational dynamics, and that has huge applications as well. And the lens of being able, there's such a social dynamic to this, and this is why I think of token economics as an art and a science, because it's truly driven by emotion. Like PR and messaging and marketing is as much as part of the token economics as the mechanism itself, right? Why do people why is Milady's why has Milady worked? Like, you know what I mean? That can only be interpreted. Like you could write a PhD in philosophy on that. Like,
I would love to see that. I would read that
yeah,
paper.
I mean, someone's going to, man. There's 100%. Like someone, I guarantee, almost certainly, someone's writing one now.
For sure.
So yeah, I think and like genuinely everyone with a disciplinary perspective. I'd love to see more academics here. Me and Paul Dillon Ellis, who goes by Post Polar now, have been talking about this for a long time, and Lawrence Function Zero, academics who've made it into this space, but we're kind of rare, right? Because it's got a bit of a bad rep. Academics are in that bubble, and they don't like risk as much, right? They like to be third-party observers. They like to watch and research. They're not the people who come in and get stuck in. And we're missing that. I think that genuinely the space needs that critical interrogation, and like to hold people to account for bad decision making, and just saying, "Hold, what are you doing?" Like, there was a period where I was watching Ohm just like blow up, and I was having big stand-up arguments with people like, this is not going to work. Like you can see the people there can just like end this game right now. There's no 3-3. There's no Nash equilibrium here. Like that guy can rug this to zero, yank all the liquidity. It's like not going to, and people were just max shield on it. And yeah, I often felt like a total lone voice of like looking at things critically. And I do think we need academics, and not just Stanford law people. At the moment, the academics that are coming in, it's just like Stanford law bods proposing reversible transactions and horrible shit like that. We need a whole breadth of STEM people and social science people and art people and everyone coming in.
Yeah, that Stanford paper was a trip. That was like last year or whatever. That lady suggested doing reversible transactions, and she was like totally floored by all the feedback she got, that people were pissed about it.
Yeah, I was very pissed about it. I mean, let's put judges in there. Let's just put judges in between every transaction. It's just insane.
Yeah, that was a crazy bit. Yes. So we're coming up on an hour. Nick, what kind of time constraints do you have?
I probably do need to go in about 5-10 minutes.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
going to go shill some students into DAOs, some
Okay.
postgrad students into DAO. So yeah, let's call it in like
Okay.
5.
Well, we got one more, and maybe you can answer this quickly, and then I'll wrap it up. I would love for you to share what you're working on after. This question here comes from Frisco, asking, how do you handle the tokenomics for a DAO dedicated to Web3 technical education and a network state city where everyone can go to learn, teach, build, innovate, and scale decentralized tools? This is, I imagine, Frisco, you have something specific in mind, but Nick, do you want to answer this?
Yes, it's a great question. And Frisco's been hanging around in our sort of Telegram group, and we've been talking about this. And like learning, I came to crypto with an idea to build a kind of on-chain university, right? It's like I wanted to build a mechanism that would. My dream has been to create a sort of decentralized education system where teachers would be funded to pay students, and there's a decentralized assessment layer where you can like break out of all the esteem games. Like, you know, a degree on paper is equivalent, like in reality, is equivalent to a degree from Cambridge is the same as a degree from like any of the other universities. But everyone says, oh, that one's Cambridge, that one's so much better. And it's not the case, right? The level of learning is genuinely universal. So the way I think about like learning DAOs are going to be really important, like and super niche and interesting. You're going to be able to go and learn in a community of a specific subdiscipline and interact with world experts and pay for it, get a cool education out of it, and get assessed for it and prove your knowledge. So I absolutely do believe there's going to be a future where you're going to be able to prove you understand something. Like I can prove that I'm great at mathematics, like using a blockchain-based assessment tool, and I don't need to go and pay 20 grand a year at a university to do it. I can just like literally prove it, and that's one of the key pieces in that. So yeah, I would say there's got to be kind of assessment layer. Like, how do you qualify that people have learned what what is going on in the learning DAO? And if you crack that, then you're gonna discover like mathematics geniuses in refugee camps, right? You know, people who would never have access to educational institutions, and that's what really changes the world, right? So, I think I just love anyone who's working on learning DAO concepts and education stuff. You know, people have played with learn to earn, and that's going to work one day. Like, people are going to be able to be funded to learn stuff. Two-sided marketplace between teachers and students, and with scholarships and public goods financing for it. That's the dream. Like, I really love it. And if anyone's working on that stuff, make sure you come and drop into our sort of Factory DAO channel and talk to me about it, because I'll happily help.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Nick. That was a very insightful answer on how to structure a DAO like that, and some ideas of mechanisms to use in order to do it, and a hopeful vision of the future as well. I want to open it up. Maybe just tell us what you're working on and where people can find you.
So I've been working on Factory DAO for the last 18 months, and this is what I'm trying to do is push DAOs into their sort of next phase, fix some of the prevailing issues with DAOs. We've got a suite of decentralized applications mechanisms that can be stitched together. So Factory DAO will basically be a DAO that governs a DAO launching protocol that's modular. It will fund new modules to be put in, so you'll be able to stitch together mechanisms that all like DAOs will need. We've got this very sort of monolithic idea of DAOs at the moment that basically just like a smart contract that allows you to pool money and then you spend it. But really the vision is they can be a new kind of organization. And I see Factory DAO as being a kind of execution layer for a modular system that can be a kind of like, I'm calling it a platform for human coordination, very highly generalized canvas for people to build a DAO on it, but also a DAO that helps people how to do it. This is highly complex stuff. Barely anyone, even people who are in DAOs, know what a DAO is. totally emerging technology, and you need the support and guidance and long-term support to be able to do it. So that's what Factory DAO is going to be. We are going to hopefully do a kind of NFT public sale in the new year, where all the money goes into a treasury, which will be fully in control of the people who put it there. They'll be able to rage quit it, govern it, fund new tools, and manage the token economy and do all sorts of exciting stuff. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. It's very much a passion project at this point. And yeah, like you can find us if you go to FactDAO Twitter account. You can jump into our Telegram there, or just follow me. I'm going to be publishing something close to like a light paper soon, and then a white paper next year that gives you the full vision. If anything, it's a little bit like it blows people's heads off. We've built a lot of stuff, and it's all a bit complicated. So we're kind of slow releasing everything over the next 3 to 6 months, and looking for contributors. So like if you're interested in getting involved, do drop me a DM, and or if you're building a DAO and want support in that, let me know.
That's awesome. And from what I've seen of Factory DAO, it's really exciting. Answering everyone's questions. It was a great discussion. I really enjoyed talking with you as always. And thank you everyone for joining this space. We had another question, Pablo. I'm sorry we couldn't get to it. I will answer that in the comments, and I'll tag Nick as well. But thank you all for coming today, and really grateful that Nick, you would join the space and give so much knowledge to all of us.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Really enjoyed it, and thanks for coming, everyone. Let's do it again soon, man. I just love talking to you about this stuff.
Awesome. Absolutely. Really looking forward to that. Thanks so much. Catch you all later.